What's going on, everybody? My name is Matt, and this is Matt's Anvil, a podcast specialized to give dungeon masters and players a place to find the tools they need to craft the weapons that they will use to create stories. Today, I'm joined with a friend of mine named Josh.
Hello.
And we're going to be talking about expectations. And I don't mean expectations like I expect you to act a certain way when you're at the D&D table, because that's boring, and most of you, I'm sure, are respectable people. That's not what the point of this is. The expectations I want are something more along the lines of, there's a lot of expectations when a person says, let's play D&D, and today on Matt's Anvil, we're going to be talking about a lot of them, and how they affect both players and dungeon masters. It's not just a matter of be a kind person at the table, because that's freaking lame.
It's kind of on the nose. It's
yeah, right. It's something you should understand.
That's more of a common sense thing.
More of what I mean is if a dungeon master, or if say your best friend walked up to you and is like, Josh, I want you to play Dungeons & Dragons with me.
Which you quite literally did.
I do all the time. Yeah, that's totally fair. That's why I'm a dungeon master. It's what I do. But if I asked you that, what is your first thought?
Oh boy, I get to build a new character.
Right. So, but that comes with a lot of expectations, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, what kind of character should I bring to this world? What kind of world is it? Is it high fantasy? Is it low fantasy? Is it gritty realism?
Yeah.
There are a lot of things to think about, just from a simple, hey, let's play D&D.
Absolutely. The story in D&D is everything. I mean, arguably, you can say the party is a major chunk of it, but without the story that they are playing through, the characters just exist.
Yeah.
So, on the player's side of things, when someone just says, hey, let's play D&D, they have a lot more questions than they do answers just from saying yes. And that's a big thing to understand, is like, the world you're playing in completely changes anything that you can play.
Yeah. Usually based on your reactions to it.
Exactly. Like, if, for example, if I was gonna say a sci-fi game, you wouldn't be playing a kobold.
No.
Which, you're famous for playing kobolds in nearly every situation.
They're great. They're just little dudes.
But if we were playing something like, the store we've been working for, or I've been working for, has been playing Alien Isolation.
I've seen Utah doing a lot of building for that game. It looks amazing.
He's been doing a great job with it.
I have no idea how to play that game yet.
Me neither. But on topic, you wouldn't bring a kobold to that sort of a game.
No, because they don't exist.
Well, it's, even if it was, say, in a D&D-esque standpoint, that's not the sort of thing that you would find a kobold in.
No, they would not make an off-world.
No. Well, yeah. I mean, kobolds on their own wouldn't make it outside their cavern for more than 10 minutes.
Nope.
But that's beside the point, because they're a playable race and you can play whatever you want.
And I do.
And he does. And you do. All the time. Ever. So, there are a lot of different types of expectations when it comes to playing Dungeons & Dragons. And so, I guess the best way to start this conversation is, Josh, what is your, like, if someone just said the words, hey, let's play D&D, what do you expect to see in the game?
Kind of probably depend on who's asking.
Sure, absolutely.
If the person who is asking is the person who's planning on running it, I would hope for a session 0, as we call it.
Sure, absolutely. That's very important.
Because that's where you can get a lot of the questions you might have about
the world.
Where are we going?
Yeah,
answered.
Absolutely.
And I have played a couple of games where session 0s haven't been a thing, and it has, in the end, made me have to kind of ask to rebuild my character, which is never a good feeling.
No. Because you go into stories with the expectation of your character fulfilling a role.
Being viable.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a leeway into another understanding. You had mentioned earlier, your first thought when asked, hey, let's play D&D, oh boy, I get to make a new character. Which is completely understandable. First of all, you have a massive collection of characters.
Over 100.
Yeah, you've delved into the player's handbook and extended modules a time or two, just once or twice, you know, just a little average margin, but every single one of those characters has a purpose, and not to say like, oh, it's because you made them to play with this, but they have a story behind them, so they have
Some of them.
some sure, but others were based on ideas, right?
Yeah. So I have some that I essentially had
an epiphany.
Yeah, essentially that. It was, I had a backstory in mind, and I built the character from the backstory.
Sure.
There are some characters I've built that I was just like, I've heard these two classes mix well, and I just tried to build them together to see how that multi-class looked. Or
Absolutely.
Felt to me. And sometimes I just build kobolds for fun.
Yeah, it sounds like something you do, but everything you mentioned though, the reason you made the characters is because they fit a niche of some kind.
Yeah.
Like, you wanted to experiment with two classes, or you had a backstory in mind,
yeah.
or you wanted to see how a kobold relates to this class. Those are all specific reasons, but each of those reasons come with expectations. For example, if you make a backstory and then the character based on that, your expectation is to use that backstory in the world you're going to play them in.
And have it, like, play a role in the world. Yeah.
Right. Or if you're building two classes or building a multi-class and playing it in a game, your expectation is to experiment with those two multi-classes.
Yeah. See how they would affect one person in one world.
Sure.
I can't actually think of it.
No, and that no.
Classic example.
But that's totally, like, for example, I made a character for a campaign we both play in that the basis for it was battlefield manipulation.
Oh, yeah, that was a great character.
I made a character that was a bard, a wizard, and
Sorcerer.
and it's yes.
Sorcerer, because you had the twin spell.
Right, but I was a triple multi-class. Now I don't remember what I was. I'm a wizard, bard, sorcerer.
Yeah.
So the concept was that
I'm not necessarily attacking things.
I'm not attacking anything. I mean, don't get me wrong, I have attack spells, but the essence of the concept was that using the specific rulings with sorcerer's metamagic and specific spells that you get access to with wizard, bard, and sorcerer, I could manipulate a battlefield in a way of teleporting my party, teleporting enemies, and shifting things into an advantage at every point in course. And so when I take a character concept like that and I go into a game, my expectation is to be able to make use of that stratagem.
Yeah.
I want to be able... Now, don't get me wrong, not every combat has to be about doing that. But
and not all of them work.
and not all of them work. But the idea is to go in with the idea to test it.
Yeah.
And then the last one, sometimes you just make kobolds and you want to see if they work with a class. There's an expectation in that of, can a kobold do what you want it to do?
Yeah.
So it's worth noting that even in something what some people consider as basic as character creation, there are a lot of expectations that go into that based on the relationship of the character you're making in the world you want to play them in.
Yeah.
So, expectations, as I've been saying all along, go a really long way when talking about what it is that makes up a game of D&D. And, I mean, there's even more that you can base it off just from the player side. Is the expectation there that it's going to be, you mentioned it before, what type of fantasy is it? Or if it's going to be fantasy at all.
Yeah.
What kind of world are you going to be playing in? What's...
Like, I really enjoyed Cyberpunk Red, and it's still an RPG, but it is more of a sci-fi
it's
thing.
vastly sci-fi than it is more fantasy. There's also the expectation of, like, you experience this firsthand, roleplay versus combat. So there is a big expectation, and this goes into that second slot of character, the stratagem side.
Yeah.
If you're going into a game and you don't really have a session zero, we'll say that because we'll talk more about session zeros in a little bit. But let's say you go into a game, you didn't have a session zero before. You made a let's go with what Arcath was.
Yeah,
if you wanna talk about Arcath a little bit.
Yeah, he was a full sorcerer. He was only level 6, but like level 6 sorcerer with a silver dragon patron essentially, or like family member.
Sure.
That he got his bloodline from, and my original build of him was just I want to kind of, because I don't see a lot of characters use a lot of ice and lightning spells.
Sure.
Especially, like I don't think I've ever actually seen somebody play a Tempest Cleric, and I kind of want to.
I think I've seen it once. It's not very often.
Exactly, but it's like I personally prefer like superheroes who use like electricity. I don't.
Right.
It's I don't know what it is about me, but
I mean, it's a very interesting power that can take place in a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
Before we go down that rabbit hole.
I just wanted to make a icy lightning little chaotic kobold who his whole thing was just he was geared for combat and just shooting lightning bolts and rays of frost and whatnot, and didn't get to do that.
Right, and that's a good leeway back into the point. So you made a character that their entire purpose, their stratagem, was to go into combat and use lightning and cold damage spells to basically reflect who he was.
But also because like ice spells get like the slow effects, which is fun, and then some of the lightning spells are cool in that they either can like kind of stun enemies, but also if you're going up against heavily armored foes, you're just like, cool, I'm more likely to hit.
Absolutely. But so tell me how you felt playing Arcath, entering a campaign that was primarily roleplay based.
I mean, at first it was I still enjoyed aspects of the character.
Sure.
Because of little gimmicky things I did.
Absolutely.
But when it came down to it, none of the proficiencies I picked ever got used.
Right.
Because they were things like investigating in case we went into a dungeon or found magic items or whatnot, or Arcana for essentially the same reason.
Sure, absolutely. Man, I say that a lot, don't I?
You've also said expectations a lot this episode.
Well, because it's the expectation. Like, what else am I supposed to say? Frick you, okay? I say expectations a lot. It's because I'm trying to reiterate to the point. I'll put a counter in the video version of this to show how many times I've said expectations so far, and then it's gonna be bad. But anyway, to continue.
It was weird. I had weird proficiencies just because like sorcerer proficiencies are a little weird. Like Arcana makes sense. I don't remember all of them. I think one of them is investigation or like history or something. But because you're multi-classed.
Yeah.
But like, I hadn't chosen like even as a charisma-based class, because I hadn't chosen any of like perception or not perception, but like persuasion or deception.
Sure.
Even as the charisma class, I couldn't quite end up as I couldn't play the face of the party role.
Mm-hmm.
Because I couldn't persuade or deceive my way out of a wet paper bag.
Yeah, and you kind of end up feeling like segregated, right? Because it's like, yeah, you have your own little gimmicks and things, but you don't have anything to actually do.
Yeah, it was a character that I did not mean entirely to end up as like, I don't want to say a one-trick pony or like a full joke character, but it did kind of feel like it dissolved into that.
There they are. Arcana, Deception, Insight, Intimidation, Persuasion, Religion.
Yeah, I think I had Arcana and Insight or something.
Probably.
And it got to the point I actually had to ask the DM later on, hey, could I retool my character a little bit? Because I'm not effective here.
No, and that's so that's a big thing to understand, right? And this goes more into the point of I know I've been called out for saying that, but your expectations going into the game were vastly different than your dungeon master's expectations of what the players would bring.
Yeah.
And so that kind of leads into the other part of what we're talking about is, so dungeon masters also have their own expectations when it comes to playing a game.
Yeah.
Which, of course, is no surprise.
Yeah, and you would know, know more about that than I would.
I mean, just a little bit. You know, I have a little experience being a dungeon master. Only a few years.
I'm just working on a planet. I don't actually know how to run it.
Hey, there's going to be an entire episode of the podcast dedicated to talking about that. Guess who's invited? So, dungeon masters have a lot of ideas when it comes to their campaigns. Whether it's homebrew or you're playing a module from the sword from D&D Beyond, Wizards of the Coast, whatever. Or maybe something a little in between, which I am rather accustomed to. So, dungeon masters have their own expectations when going into a game. For example, I run a Tyranny of Dragons knockoff at this point.
You can't call it a knockoff when it's better than the original.
I mean, it's still a knockoff.
According to all of your players.
That's not the point. I still think it could use a lot of work. Because I don't do enough for it like I think I should.
In your defense, we kind of knew it to the play.
We're getting off topic. So, I run a modified version of Tyranny of Dragons where I love, so I would say my best skill as a dungeon master is improvisation.
And magic item creation.
That's enough. I just love making magic items. That's beside the point. There's some bad ones out there. You don't want to see them. They're not good.
Are they funny?
Wand of detect magic that only detects itself.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
The wand of summon a wand.
Yeah, or the wand of summon a wand. It's great. But I expect certain things, and dungeon masters in general expect certain things when players walk to the table. The biggest one is that I expect players to not necessarily be ready, but to be familiar with the game I'm playing. If it's for new players, then my expectation is for them to be open to learning. But in general, when you're playing D&D and you walk up to someone casually and say, hey, let's play D&D, the expectation is there that they know how to play, or at least know how to play well enough that they can play in a game.
Especially if they, say yes.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. If they're a little finicky on it, or they're like, oh, I don't know, I've never really done it before, then that's totally understandable.
Then you have the expectation of, hey, I'm going to have to...
Yeah, I'm going to show you how to play. Yeah. And that's first of all, that's a wonderful thing. I highly encourage everyone. Everyone should play Dungeons & Dragons at least once. Both as player and as Dungeon Master.
I was actually going to say that, too. I know I haven't done it yet, but I fully recommend that if you just have a group of 4 or 5 people that want to play, each person should try to run part of the module.
Absolutely.
Because it gives you the look from behind the scenes, and
it gives you an understanding and an appreciation of how much work goes into the game, but also how little work goes into the game.
Yep.
Which
that's
leads
no joke.
No, and that's when I said earlier that one of my best skills is improvisation, I mean it in the most literal sense. When I create concepts or sessions for my D&D campaign, I build it. A lot of people say they build it in scenes or they work in certain parts. I don't do that. It's not really. It doesn't fit my style. Instead, I build it in an outline. So I want the party to be here. They have the option to go here. They fight this thing here. How they get there, the NPCs they meet, the various other things that happen, that's entirely BS'd, in the most part, is the only way that I can think to describe it. But that's me, and that's my expectation when it comes to making a game, or making a session, is that I know what I need to do to give, or to try to give my players the most effective use of my skills to give them the best time.
Yeah.
And that's very important. So if you think you're a great author, I wouldn't say bring a super heavy story driven campaign, unless that's what your players want, and then, of course, absolutely. But giving your players options in a world that you made, no one's going to be more familiar with that world than you. And your expectation that they're going to explore your world, I mean, that's a given, because that's what players do.
Yeah.
The best part about D&D, and the reason why I recommend that everyone should be on both sides of the Dungeon Master screen, is because to explore and to make the exploration have the exact same emotions from a different outlook. It's exciting.
That's an interesting way to put it. Like, I hadn't actually thought about it that way.
Right, but I mean, that's really what it is. When you sit down to play D&D, like we went and played Lunar Ascendancy last night, a homebrew D&D game made by a friend of ours named Tobias. We had a mild expectation of what was going to happen. We'd played the start of that campaign before.
Yes,
in a very rushed sense, but not the point.
It was fun though.
But we were excited because we were going to explore with characters that we'd never been in the world with,
Yep.
with party members that we'd never played with
people we'd never played with.
Like,
and that's the cool thing is you can play with 5 people, and even that people that you know, and when they bring a character, some people are just really good at getting into
character.
Like Kevin.
Oh my gosh.
I have seen.
Yeah, that's. Oh.
I saw that man play D&D for the first time, and he was already almost a master.
He was
getting into
amazing.
Character, and it was amazing to watch.
This guy has gone from bringing a 9-year-old thief into a D&D campaign.
Halfling
Thief. Yeah, so like 3 feet tall, to bringing a like.
Always on shrooms.
Yeah.
Saxophone playing druid.
Yeah, and
druid.
And so like that's a phenomenal thing. But that's the sort of thing, like, we get excited about those sorts of things.
Who immediately tried to sacrifice himself. Scene 1.
I refuse. Not the point. But on the other side of that, the Dungeon Master gets very excited because people are playing in his world.
And when he can see that they are having a great time, or just interacting with each other,
it makes
character. It's got to be a great feeling.
It makes everything worth it.
Yeah.
Like, my party doesn't really know this, but I stress about my sessions for every Friday all the time. I stress about whether or not they have good quality. I stress about whether or not I'm keeping everyone entertained, whether or not I'm including everyone. It's a very stressful thing because I still want to tell a story, but I want to tell a story that affects everyone. Every player brought a character to this campaign expecting it to mean something.
Yeah. And I think you have done a better job of making each character feel like they mean something than some of the DMs I've played with who have been doing this for years.
Well, I greatly appreciate that compliment. I really do. But to me, I don't think I'm doing enough. And I say that because it's not necessarily because players come to me and say, "Hey, I don't feel like my character has gotten enough attention." No one's done that, and I am partially glad about it and partially not glad, because I feel like if anyone has that emotion, they should bring it up. Yep. Like I expect my players, another one on the list, not the words, just expectations to have in a game. Yeah. I expect my players to be open with me.
Yeah.
If they have an issue with something that I'm doing, please, I want them to talk to me about it. I want them to say, "Hey, I think you're targeting me," or "I think you're doing this," or everything else. But to me, when it comes to involving characters in a story, I don't just want them to exist in the world. I want direct ties to it.
Yeah.
For example, we have a character named Balmond. At the time, he was a bard rogue. Yep. And his story had been that he had become a bit of a wanderer. There was a tragedy that happened in his youth. His sister had given him a memento and then vanished. And then he joined a mercenary group for a while and then went and did something else.
Did his own thing.
Yeah, he did his own thing. So I made a mercenary group that had a major involvement in the story just because of that.
And then we found that Bree had also made a character.
Yeah, Bree had made a character based on a mercenary group too, so I added them together.
And just gave them ties to each other, which is another great thing to do, is have some of your characters know each other.
Right.
Because then it gives them a reason to be traveling with the group.
And that's actually been a big one in some of my campaigns lately. Or some of my sessions lately, sorry. I only run one campaign right now. I don't run multiple. I don't want to die.
Darn.
But character inclusion into the party has a lot of expectations with it. When players sit at a table, half the time they've never spoken to each other, so there's not really any connection about why that brings them together. Normally that's why a session 1 exists, or a session 0 exists, or in a session 1 there is something that brings the party together. Like in Tobias's campaign, it was the test mission. It was the letters from Ambassador Hope that brought us all to the Royal Library, and then she employed us to go take a test that ended up devolving into chaos because of Henry. Anyway, not the point.
As a chaotic little kid, though.
Yeah.
So many kids in that campaign.
I don't want to talk about why people bring like 10-year-olds or 12-year-olds into a Lunar Ascendancy campaign when we know what happens in it. But that's not
to an extent.
I know pretty much everything that happens in that first.
I literally purposely tried to data dump information about that campaign so that I could re-enjoy it when we got back.
I'm just excited for all the little details. But again, we're getting off topic. So what was I talking about? Oh, party involvement.
Yeah.
So if you don't have something like that in your party, right? Like I didn't really have it in mine.
Yeah. What's the point of your, like, why is your group together?
Right. And that's a very important thing. Okay? The expectation that there is a reason the party is working together is something that every person at the table thinks about. The DM thinks about it in terms of the story, and each individual player thinks about it in terms of their own stories. And it's a very key detail that a lot of people miss because they're so enraptured, or at least a lot of DMs miss, because they're so ready to get into the meat of their story that they forget about the simpler things to get players excited just to be with other people.
Yeah.
So, for example, for Balmond and Bree's character's name is, I don't remember off the top of my head. So, when Balmond and Everwyn were first making their characters, first of all, they had no idea about each other, which was really funny. They were both just originally part of a mercenary group. So I, as the DM, was like, okay, you guys were actually in the same one. And I instantly made a bond between not just the two characters, but the two players. Because they both got excited that they had something to share between themselves.
Yeah.
I was receiving messages that night until like 1 a.m. As Bree and Matt were talking to each other and like, hey, can this work for this? And can this work for that? And can this work for that? And a part of me was like, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Please do everything you want. The other part of me was like, I need to go to bed. I have work in the morning. Which has happened a lot in my campaign. People in this group, guys, I have to sleep at some point. Please. Please let me sleep. You guys message until like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning sometimes, and I can't take this.
I'm looking at you, Andy.
Anyway,
I'm just kidding. She's a lurker.
But the expectation that if you don't have a reason for the party to be together, that you as the dungeon master still need to give them a reason.
Yeah.
Even if it's a couple of people first and then the rest of them all together. Example, because this is of course always going to be full of examples. In Tyranny of Dragons, as in the first book, it's actually the Horde of the Dragon Queen.
Yeah.
You start in the town of Greenest, and according to the book, you basically just arrive there. All of the players arrive as travelers during a raid on the town. That's okay.
It's very broad.
It is very broad.
It doesn't give. There's no meat to that. There
no.
is. Cool. Me and a random group of people are walking into a town and we see it on fire.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, don't get me wrong, that's an okay way to start a story, because if your players are playing people that would help in that situation,
Yeah.
they're all going to work together and help in the situation.
But we've got, like, and I know he wasn't there at the beginning, but Calcifer made the, what was it, lawful evil? We found it out, and we're just like, yeah, he would not have
He
helped
would
in
not
that
have helped in that situation.
because he would have had no reason.
He would have watched it burn.
Yeah.
Which, you know, if that's his character style, that's his character style.
Yeah. He plays to it very well.
Oh, absolutely. But it's a very, like, it's a very moot point that if your party expects to be together when they sit at the table, you need to give them a reason to be together when you sit at the table.
Yeah.
Whether it's, even if it's just one or two people that have links to one another that make them want to stand by each other, that's enough to cause a spark to catch the rest of the party.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for that sort of thing, like, work with backstories, use everything to your advantage.
And that's the thing. Encourage your players to have even, I don't know,
A page, a paragraph.
like just some bullet points of like, hey, these are things that have happened in my life.
Oh, absolutely. That's
Like,
and
some aspect of a backstory.
and that leads to an expectation on the DM side.
Yeah.
If I'm sitting at a table with experienced players, people who have played, I would say you would be considered an experienced D&D player if you have played in upwards of like 5+ campaigns.
I was doing that in a week. What?
No, right, I know. but even if it's across 5 years, if
Yeah.
you've been in about 5 campaigns, even if it's just one or two one shots or something like that, you have enough experience in D&D and the understanding of it.
Hell, even if you played the same class each time.
Yeah.
Like, at the very least,
You
would know that class.
Absolutely.
Well enough to be like, cool, I can just run this class.
But as a dungeon master, if I have a group of people that are that experienced in the game that I'm running, I have the expectation that the players will put themselves in the world somewhere and give me something to use to drag them deeper into the story.
Yeah. One of the things, like, you should never, I shouldn't word it that way, but like, I don't think it's a good idea to, when you join a campaign, to just be like, hey, here's my character sheet. And just have, like, yeah, you have your character built, but like, if you have no connection to the world,
Then you don't have any connection to your character.
yeah,
It's just a sheet of paper.
I'm kind of referencing a talk I saw between Brennan and Matt, and it's like, I think it was after the, I can't remember what it's called. Matt Mercer, Brennan
Lee Mulligan,
and the
Abria Ironguard.
yeah.
It was
we're
their
talking-
it was yeah, it was
post-apocalypse
Yeah.
session. They were talking as DMs. They're like, cool. If you have no connection and no wants or anything, you win. Like, that's nirvana. Or that's enlightenment or whatever. It's
right.
like, why? You can't bring that character to the world because it's like, what are you doing?
No.
What are you doing with it?
Absolutely. And that's those are, and I keep using this word because that's the theme. Frick you. But those are expectations on both sides of that character sheet.
Yeah.
As a DM, I expect you to look at this character and not see a piece of paper, but to see a part of yourself that you put on paper. Whether it's a story you wrote or a concept that you came up with or something you just wanted to try.
Yeah.
You have to have a spark of interest in the things that you made for me to be able to most effectively use what you've given me. And on the player side of that, if you're not playing something that interests you, why are you playing it?
Yeah. You have to be excited about the character you're playing, but also the world you're playing in.
Absolutely.
And you have to, because like, even if you just come up with, like, some of my kobolds just have, how do they work with this class? Even with that, if I am asked to play in a D&D game and I find out what the setting is, and I think, hey, I want to play this class or whatnot, and I've already got a character built for it, I will try to find ways to, like, I will look up things about that world to be like, cool, where did I live?
Yeah, no,
Like,
and that's...
where would I have existed, or what part of this place would I have been from? Like, during Lunar Ascendancy, the odds that my kobold would have been from, like, the snowy mountain area because he grew up around, I think it was...
Cloud or Storm?
I think it was Storm Giants.
Yeah, I think it was.
He grew up around a Storm Giant. But it's like, that was the only place on the map that I could see that I was like, cool, that place is mountainous enough that it would make sense for him to have been from there. Absolutely. This character that I've had built for months and have just been, like, frothing at the mouth to play. I found a world and I was like, cool, where would he have been from here? And I started trying to find ways to integrate him into the world. And then when it got time to play, there are some things, and I love doing this, even with a plus to my intelligence. It's hopefully a +1, but, like, there are things he just wouldn't know. Like, sure, y'all were, because you're playing a wizard, and you and somebody were talking about spells and whatnot, and he's just like, yeah, I don't know what half of those words mean, but you said we're getting paid, so all right. Yeah, no, and that's a really brilliant point to bring up, is like there's nothing that's, let me rephrase that. You had said that in order to really enjoy D&D, you have to both love the player or the character you're playing and the world you're playing in, or at least be excited about them. Maybe not love them. But to be excited about something is to have affection for it, yeah, in one way or another. That is probably the most prominent thing to take from at least today. Because that's where all expectations about your games stem from. Yeah. If you are excited to play a character concept, and you are excited to travel this world that you're playing in, you are 9/10 of the way to where you need to be to fully enjoy everything you're doing. Yeah. Because that's all it is. And if you're just excited enough about the character concept, a DM can help push towards the excitement about the world. Absolutely. And I mean, that's our job. Yeah. Our job is to make sure that everyone enjoys what they're doing in the world that we made. That's the whole concept. That's the whole thing, the whole shtick. Yeah. And so our expectations are that we can make a world to fit everyone that plays in it. And that people can be excited about. And that people can be excited about, or will be. Yeah, no, absolutely. It's also, on the player's side, it's our expectations as Dungeon Masters that players will put the effort to enjoy what we've made. Yeah. Because it requires effort. It is on both parties. I mean, you have to make the character, you have to describe them, come up with them, think about them, spend time wondering what you're going to do with them, and then you have to play them. And also try to find a goal for them. Like, oh yeah, absolutely. I struggle with that just because, like, I forget. I legitimately forget to think about it, but, like, doesn't really matter what it is. Just have something that they want to accomplish. Right. Because even if it is not directly in line with whatever the story is, having them want to do something gives them a reason to go out and do everything. Right. And all of these things that we're listing, I mean, goals, making them, writing their backstories, all of that is work. That is effort that you are putting in. I mean, you can understand exactly what I mean. You've made so many characters. Yeah. I can understand because, I mean, I've made my fair share. I've come up with some things in the past. But it takes more than the effort of one person to build a world. No matter how well written or well spoken that person is.
I mean, sure, authors do it all the time, but they are writing multiple characters.
They're writing, in some cases, worlds worth of characters.
Right. They're playing more people.
Yeah.
And those people are influenced. Other people have done things to create personas of different people that become characters. So when you go into playing a D&D campaign, you have to have expectations.
You have to know what they are.
You should know what your expectations are when you go into a D&D campaign.
And then learn everyone else's. That should be part of session 0.
Absolutely. What do you and that's something we encourage both DMs and players to ask each other and everyone at the table. What are your expectations for the game you're about to play? That should always be in session 0.
Yeah.
Which is a great leeway to what is a session 0?
It's just the first time you and the entire table sit down together, and sometimes it could be building the party, just because maybe not everyone's got a character built, especially if you've got somebody new at the table, like the Nexus. They have a lot of walk-ins.
Absolutely.
And it's great. I love to see it. I love meeting new people, especially in that setting. I just forgot where I was going.
No, that's totally fine. But no, and that's a fair point. A session 0 is the start. It's not session 1.
No.
You haven't begun the story. You're not playing a character. Session 0 is when everyone gets together and they come to an understanding of who they are, what character they're playing.
You might not even go into character on session 0 because you're trying to understand yours and everyone else's characters and what everybody wants to be doing.
Yes. And so session 0 is a very pivotal thing.
That is where you find out, are we playing high fantasy,
low fantasy?
Gritty realism.
I will always encourage for a dungeon master to have a session 0. And the reason for that is more than just so you can explain to your players what world it is, or where they're playing, or what they're doing. There's more to it than that. It is your opportunity to learn who is playing your campaign, what characters are going into your world, what things that people expect to see, or do, or say, or be.
Because you can give the same module to 3 different DMs with 3 different parties, and those campaigns, even through the module, can have very few similarities.
Absolutely. It's one of those old things of people sharing stories, and every time it's retold, it's slightly different.
Yeah.
Just as Josh said, three different people can read the same story and take something different from it.
And very often do. That's an excellent point. Because everyone looks at it differently. Like, nobody's going to look at the same story the same way, because they approach it differently. Because everyone approaches everything differently.
And the same can be said for both DMs and players.
Yeah.
I could run Tyranny of Dragons 100 times, but I guarantee that out of those 100 attempts, my players would have 100 different experiences about what I ran.
Especially with the way you run them.
But I would also have 100 different stories because of the players that play them. Even if they were playing the same character, they wouldn't make the same decisions.
That would be boring.
They wouldn't act the same way. The circumstances would be different. And that's a very distinct understanding when it comes to playing D&D. It's very important to understand and to have expectations when you come to the table. Because those expectations and that understanding are they are your weapons. They are what you bring to the table to ensure that you are going to have the most fun or be the most excited that you can be. And if you don't put in the effort on both sides to be one way or another, if the players don't put in the effort to make their characters, to have a character concept, to know maybe not necessarily what they want to do, but how they want to go about it, and the Dungeon Master side to understand that the players are going to do what they want, they're going to explore, they're going to make decisions, and they're going to play certain ways. That's vastly important for understanding and having fun.
Yeah.
Which,
that's the point.
At the very end, absolutely. That is the point of Dungeons & Dragons, everybody. Enjoy it.
Some escapism.
Have some fun. If you want to make a character that controls an entire battlefield and teleports people off of cliffs, do it. If you want to make a kobold that has the strength of 20 men and lifts giants for push-ups, do it. If you want to make a turtle that does things, I've seen it done.
Turtle monks are terrifying.
I've had a player do it. DMs, if you want to make a world where asteroids fall out of the sky on a daily basis, do it. If you want to make a world where a desert of silver dust turns to raw silver every full moon, do it. If you want to make a world or an item or a situation or a story, do it.
Just do it.
Because you are the only one who can meet your expectations. And that's the other understanding to come out of this. In D&D, the biggest expectation that everybody has, everyone has this expectation, everyone sees it, everyone thinks about it, everyone knows it, is to have fun. And there is absolutely no reason ever that you should ever not have fun in D&D.
Yeah.
Even in those tense moments where you're struggling in battle, or you're waist deep in a mystery, or you're traveling across the land in sweltering heat. Even in those moments where nothing really happens, you're going shopping for the day. Even in the quietest moments, when a dungeon master asks you what you're thinking about as you're staying up in your inn at night. In all of those moments, you should always be having fun.
Yeah.
Because if you're not, why are you playing?
That sounded a little harsh.
But it's true.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, you can get upset at certain things in D&D. You can have bad rolls. A story situation, an idea you have could backfire. You can be upset at the game, but if you can look at those moments and still say, "Wow, yeah, I rolled 3 nat 1s in a row, but that fight was so cool."
Yeah. Yeah, I've had those nights.
Then there is absolutely no reason, or let me rephrase that, you have absolutely every reason to continue playing that game.
Yeah.
But if you go to a session and the only thing you think about is, am I going to have to deal with this person? Am I going to have to struggle through this again? Am I even going to have to consider the idea of not playing?
Yeah.
Why are you in it to begin with?
That is definitely a game you want to... That's not a game you want to be in. You want to find something where you can actually enjoy the game. And if... Step one is definitely talking to whoever...
Talk to everyone.
Yeah. Just make
Talk
sure
to the
that
players.
Everyone is still enjoying what's going on.
Absolutely. Talk to the players. Talk to the dungeon master. Talk to the people sitting on the side just watching. Talk to everybody. See what they're expecting.
Yeah.
See what they want. See what the stories they want to show, to share, to tell, to play. Because those questions are going to lead you to having the funnest campaigns that you will ever have. And that's really all it is. That's what expectations are in Dungeons & Dragons. They are your ultimate understanding about what it is that you want to do in a world that you physically create.
Or help create. Or, Yeah, because everybody at that table has
Everyone
played a part in its creation.
Absolutely.
Or recreation, essentially.
Sure.
In some cases.
Absolutely. That's another reason why I said even if I ran the same campaign 100 times, 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times,
Please don't do that. For your sanity.
they would always be different.
Yeah.
Because every time someone plays at that table, they add something new. They bring expectations about the things that they want to do, of who they want to be, and how they want to play. And they affect my expectations of wanting them to explore the world, to have fun, and to feel things in that campaign that makes it unique time and time again. There aren't many things that you could pull out of everything we've talked about today, other than I've said the word expectations probably 300 times. But if there's anything to understand, it's that the importance of expectations in Dungeons & Dragons, when you sit at that table, whether it is behind the screen or in front of it, that's going to define how you have fun. And that is always the most important thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, with that understanding, that is a perfect place for us to bring this first episode of Matt's Anvil to an end. I would like to first thank Josh for being on the show with me.
I'm not used to the camera placement.
Well, we're not talking to the camera right
I
now.
know.
We're talking to the microphone. Thank you, Josh, for being here.
Every day.
Without further ado, thanks everyone so much for listening. Thanks everyone so much for watching. I will catch you in the next one. And please always remember, have fun. Bye, everybody.